Glad you could join us for Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast. We're here with Bill Reed on regenerative practice.
Hello there.
There he is. How are you, sir?
I am well. How are you, Jody? Hi, Lauren.
Good.
Bill, it's so nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Quite often, Lauren and I have an adult beverage while we're chatting.
Oh,
Today I have
At the end of the
water.
day.
I have to drive shortly after, so I'm
Yeah,
drinking
or a
water.
non-adult beverage, whatever you would like. We're very casual.
Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. When you see the little microphone in the lower right, click on that to learn more. We're so glad you're here.
Bill, this is pretty unofficial. We just kind of dive right in.
Yeah.
cool. Well, start diving.
Start diving. Okay. So Jody, you go.
One of the things that I really want to get into a little bit, if it's okay with you, in the last several recordings, we've started talking about regenerative practice and what does that mean? How is it a different approach to work at all levels and living, quite frankly? And since you are just grounded in it and teaching regenerative practice, I'm not going to say you're a wise old man. You're a wise man.
Everybody gets trapped by the imposter syndrome.
Oh, well, thank you. You can say old too. What's that bumper sticker? It's so weird being the same age as old people or something.
Yeah, exactly. I know every time I'm in a moment where I'm thinking, but boy, the people around me think I should know what I'm doing. I look inside and at my 12-year-old that lives inside of me
Right.
and say, you be quiet now. They think you know what you're doing.
Exactly. Yes, we're all imposters to some degree.
Which is actually quite freeing when you let yourself just recognize that.
Yeah, well, we are. Well,
It's
the more I know, the less I know.
Yeah.
So we obviously, in the way I framed that question, I haven't introduced you to our audience at all. We just discover people as we go. But if you would like to say a few words to frame it, you're more than welcome to.
Setting the frame.
Well, I'll frame it in a way that embodies my journey, which is from architecture when I was a very young kid, knowing that, and also kind of a weird bias, and who knows where it came from. When I was 5 years old, I would get into fights with my friends about zero population growth. And then when I was 8, I remember asking my father about economics and how they could grow forever. So where did that come from? I don't know. But I've had this impulse to think systemically.
Systems thinking.
When I was in 8th grade, I was turned on to Lewis Mumford by a really wise English teacher. I just geeked out on that kind of wide-scale systemic thinking. And I realized that the most beautiful building in the world is unsuccessful if it's in bad communities. So I realized I had to be a planner, couldn't just be an architect. And it took me until after college, though, to realize that if the environment was bad, what good is a community?
The U.S. Green Building Council.
But it wasn't until the U.S. Green Building Council came along, and I was not one of the founders, although I was one of the early members and founding board of directors, where it made all of a sudden I could see, oh, it all comes together, it's integrated. And then that led me to think, well, how do we integrate all this stuff instead of just a checklist? And then the question is, where do we stop integrating? And that led to a practice of, well, it's not just a building, it's life, right? So how do we work with life? And that's my picture of my journeys.
Regenesis and regenerative practice.
Regenesis heard me speaking after they were founded, about a year after they were founded in 1995, and said, you're onto something and we think we can actually help you. So I said, yes, indeed you can. So I've been journeying with Regenesis ever since then. And we have one take on this world of regeneration. I think it's a very valid one and very rich one, but it's certainly not the only one. And just, framing it from that perspective, who knows? Where's the true religion, right? Well, there's lots of truths out there, but we're on a particular journey, which we think is very important. And enough people are thinking so. So here we are.
It is a journey.
which is wonderful. I love the expression of the work as a journey. I think that that's really important. I've gotten hopefully not bogged down in language, but language is something that I've been using to try and open up discussions. I also like the fact that, and I think the most successful sustainability practitioners or regenerative whatever term you want to use, the most successful people are always aware that they can't possibly know everything or the goal answer. They can only be practicing toward their current understanding of that. And that there's that openness to more knowledge. So maybe that's what the practice is just being open to more knowledge.
That is the practice. And we would say it slightly differently. It's the practice is, are we evolving consciously?
The project is not really the project.
Right. I have run across a lot of situations where something doesn't go right in a project, something doesn't go right. And instead of looking at that circumstance and saying, why didn't it go right? What can we learn from this? And kind of sharing that there was an evolution of the thought process or the purpose behind the project.
Right.
Everyone kind of clamped down and said, oh, that's embarrassing. What do you think of embarrassment?
And it is embarrassing.
As a mode of operation.
Yeah.
It is embarrassing.
Well, you know, you've heard me tell stories, Jody, probably Lauren hasn't, but, you know, we were fired many times and we probably still will be, because we are pushing the envelope. And the envelope we're pushing, if you will, it can't be a push, but the invitation that we're extending is that this project is not about the project. It's about the system, and it's about you. The project is the interface. And so we don't start with the project. I like to say, your project is not the project. The project is the system of life that we're part of. And if we understand that, then it informs the project itself. So the system comes first, not building a project and doing less damage to the system. It's how do we align ourselves with the way life wants to work in this particular place, and and this is the hardest part, is getting rid of my preconceptions and being humble enough to learn those lessons for each project.
The being state.
That's a hard one.
It's insane. So you have to be your own psychotherapist in the process of
the
the work.
And we practice the becoming state, the being state required for every project, because it's different in every case. Who do you need to be for this meeting? Who do you need to be for this project in order for it to launch that community, those living system participants on an evolutionary journey?
It's interesting. So I'm a practicing interior designer and sustainability consultant, but in addition to that, I teach at 2 local college campuses. And I find that I'm going to start with my students first. The students are much easier to convince that they're part of the whole.
Yeah.
They've never thought about it that way before, but you can kind of get them to this point where they start to understand that they are actually part of the system and they have impact on a system. I find it harder personally in my practice to get people to think of a project as being part of a system. And it's been funny because something that I just went through, 2 classes ago, I was just teaching about high performance buildings. And I'm starting to insert in particular how high performance buildings should be a part of all communities. And I happened on the AIAs, they have a whole web section dedicated to this now. And it has tools, for example, that teaches or that kind of relays to architects and designers, I suppose, how to push your project beyond the four walls and actually engage with the community.
Don't stop at the wall.
Don't stop at the wall, right? And so I found this really interesting because as I sit and I look at my projects, especially as an interior designer, I find that sometimes it's hard to even get people to want to do the right thing on the inside of their walls for their own people. And now I'm supposed to convince people to go outside of the walls.
And see, that's the hard part, is that this is not about convincing people. This is about introducing people to the potential that's out there if they slow down and pay attention. Then there's no convincing needed. But that's the hard part.
Begin with the end in mind.
As one of our mentors says, begin with the end in mind. And the end in mind is the system. The evolutionary health of the system. If we do not start there, it is really difficult to convince people to. Well, I've got a meeting right after this, actually, with a city, and they are all full of technology, right? What we're going to do, where they have UC Davis involved with their research department. And so they're all excited about technology. And what I plan to ask them is, how do you know which technology is right?
Why?
Yeah, and why? And the only answer that I can imagine for that is to ask the place what it needs, and the community as a living system what it needs and what it could benefit from. Now we can actually begin to have meaningful dialogue around what's appropriate, as opposed to imposing my idea of good on people, which is, by the way, which is a form of colonialism.
That's true.
If I just say, I know what's right for you, I'm going to go through the lead checklist and say, we're going to do this and this and this because I get a lot of points for it. That's gross colonialism. That's a way too hyperbolic statement, but just to make the point. Right?
Yeah, to make the point.
Potential, joy, and will.
I was on a call last night. Was it last night? I don't even remember when it was. I kind of have a blur going on about the days right now for some reason. They were asking very good questions, and it was about defining, what research and what outreach is needed to really move the industry forward in New York State. But of course, it's going to be beyond the walls of New York State. So we got into these great discussions, but a lot of the questions were using words that were limiting as well. And looking at and this is not exactly one of the questions, but looking at what do we need to learn to become more energy efficient in our projects? And a lot of the things that came up, well, the limits are the budget, the limits are this, the limits are that. And I got a little bit too excited on the calls, which was fine. It seemed to go okay. But I was like, no, wait. You're trying to figure out what we need, but you're not even talking about what the goal is. I mean, if and you're talking about equity as if you can just plug it in,
or band-aid it,
or and there's an entire difference between saying here's our budget, what can we get within this budget? That's one way you can look at things, and another way you can look at things is saying, what are we aiming for? What is our potential here? What is our goal? Right. And by the way, how far can we get along that path within this budget? That's an entirely different thing.
And I would actually say that yes, and that budget is question indicates to me a deeper question, that where does your will really reside?
Right.
Because when you have the will, money does not stand in the way. I like to say that when I was in college, I had no money, but I made it up to see a girlfriend in California a lot, and I was in New York. So you'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. So, I thought that was just great. The understanding, and people on the call were just kind of, I brought up joy as well, because there was what's the motivator? And they were all talking about money. We need more grants. We need more targeted services for this. And I said, people don't do things for money. that you might think they do, and maybe the very wise people who already want to do it are further motivated by money, but that's not the inception point of the desire. So how do you connect with people and illustrate the benefit to them and their goals within their confines of what they're trying to do, or even beyond the confines of what they want to do, is I guess what I mean to say.
And yet money is real.
Well, yeah, but yet money is real, and yet if we can, well, it's real enough anyway. What we oh, I got so many threads to go down on this one. I was working on a project out in Vancouver where the overarching aim was save the taxpayer money, because they know that was going to be their political hot button. But in 6 months, that project shifted from saving the taxpayer money to building a healthy community in North Vancouver. And money was never mentioned again. Now, it was actually, but the idea of limiting it, that the focus was tax money. And the next wastewater treatment plant that was built, the aim was saving the orca whales.
Wow.
But the shift, you see, the shift went from this to the system. And that changed the whole nature of the project.
This is definitely messier, and it can be faster.
This becomes messier, right? I think that might be what people are afraid of, but it's so much richer with information and insight into how to get the work done.
Well, and so many more opportunities and barriers you can play with. It does get messier, but all I can say is that every project we work on comes in much faster than any conventional project.
Oh.
So people say, well, how much time does this take? Oh, well, it takes a few months at the beginning to get people aligned and aimed and do a little bit of research, but our average is 18 months faster to permit. And I work with a couple development firms, one in New York City, one in Chicago, who are partnering now on a number of projects. And they have the same story. When they go to a community, they don't propose the object. They don't say, here's the design. What do you think? And you know what the subtext of that is? I'm a great developer. I have great architects. You're going to love this. No, nobody loves it. Maybe a few people love it, but it's now it's an imposed idea, helicoptering into your community. What they do is they say, we have control of this land. We are developers. And this is what I say, we need to make a profit, but we know that it is not our right to tell you what to build. We need to partner with you to figure that out.
How wonderful.
That changes the entire dynamic, and they get approvals to do projects where no developers have ever gotten approval.
Watch Lauren in this next segment.
Because there's respect.
There's respect, and it's all about relationship and openness and communication. There's all total transparency, and as they say, well, it sounds cynical because they really do care about community, but they laugh all the way to the bank. They're making more money than other developers because cost of money.
Okay. So,
Lauren's freaking out.
We gotta talk about this. I need to talk about this. So you're giving me like a visceral reaction, like the time that we were talking to Jay about going vegan and all of the reasons why, and you knew in your heart and soul that like you had to go in that direction after that conversation. And I'm having the same thing where I'm like, oh, I need to go in that direction.
See, we actually started this video blog not because we wanted to do a video blog, but because we wanted to connect with each other and learn. And we figured that while we were learning, we would record it and see if we could spread the learning, right?
Yeah. So
here we go.
I have shared that I am currently freeloading at my parents' house, right? I don't wish to do that for forever. And I have been trying to figure out how I know where I want to move. I know what I want it to look like. And I wanted to do a small urban infill neighborhood development one, money is definitely a problem for me. Two, now what I'm hearing you say is that I shouldn't just go and necessarily bust my way into an existing neighborhood and think I know what's right. Which on some level I knew, but now I'm going to take extra precaution with. Is that what you're saying? Like, even though I want to be a part of the community?
Yeah, I would say that anytime you propose an idea, there will be a restraint. People will say, wait a minute, girl, right? Hold on. And it's probably more productive to say, I really love this neighborhood and would love to live here. And I know that I want to engage you guys in a process of mutual respect. I would love to build a little thing here. Can we explore that together?
You have to be brave to be vulnerable.
It's an invitation, right? You're making an invitation as opposed to a statement.
Okay.
So in a way, you're asking permission as opposed to declaring a position.
Right.
Everything comes from good relationships.
Well, and you have to actually image that in your own life. Just put yourself, maybe do a little meditation on that. Is how does it feel when somebody declares something to you, and how does it feel when somebody sincerely invites a conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense.
And how does that invitation open you to more of the potential of that process?
Mm-hmm.
I think is really key.
Right.
It's especially when you're talking about community. And I think we talked about this a little bit before, Lauren. Your focus is really to be part of a community.
Right.
So
yeah, start with that.
Yeah, you can start with the community, and then from that community connection, develop the place that you will live.
Right.
Much better being that kind of begin with the end in mind. You want to have good relationships, so start with good relationships.
Yeah.
People need time to adapt.
The other thing I was going to say about money is you got to talk about it. And because people, especially when you're introducing this kind of subject, this arcane, esoteric subject to people, they're thinking about, this is going to cost more money. This is going to cost more money. That's all they're thinking about. Yeah. They're not really able to hear you. They can see that it's possible. And number two, that you are conscious of money. So that basically eases the pressure. And then you say, now let's talk about this. By actually jumping off the deep end and saying, here's what we're really doing and here's why. And we bring our buildings in faster and lower budget. And well, that's kind of it. And we harmonize all sorts of conflict. So
that's key.
When the harmonization as opposed to compromise is a big deal. And people come up to us and say, well, how do we do that? Now, they're still thinking about a project, and it is very difficult to get them off a project-centric focus. That's the hard part, because you're here to help them do a project, even though what we're really here to do, if we're regenerating life, is to work on life, and then the project emerges from that. And by the way, you have to change the way you do business and think about the world. So that comes as at some point, people realize that. I had one client say to me, my minister doesn't get away with saying the shit you say, Bill.
It's awesome.
I thought it was kind of an interesting quote. And he fired us. But a year later, he rehired us, and we did many other projects with him. And that's pretty much the story. I've got multiple stories about being fired and then being rehired about a year later, which I think is really an interesting compliment.
It is, because they've gotten enough of an insight, but they're hitting resistance, and then they back away. But in backing away, they're able to see that the old ways don't work anymore.
So, Bill, did you ever choose poorly?
So can I ask you a question about your own journey? You kind of
Yeah.
unpacked the milestones of it. I want to ask, is there a moment that sticks in your mind that was especially a challenge to you in that learning process and the evolution of your understanding of your role, or a place where you chose poorly, like you had a moment where you just couldn't move forward, just like the clients who step away from you? Did you have a
Yeah.
moment of stepping away from that information?
It's a fun question. I do want to, this is interesting because I've been reflecting on this recently. I would say, oh, this is going to sound really strange, but I had probably every 8 to 10 years, I knew what I had to do. And I saw my first, well, I shared with you knowing being an architect and knowing to be a planner. And then my first passive solar greenhouse I saw in 1977. And it was a religious experience.
Mm.
It was profound. I said, oh my, you get free energy. I just had never conceptualized that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so then that put me on this environmental journey, and in a deep way. And then it was hearing about the U.S. Green Building Council just being formed. That was the other, oh, we can do a whole system. Oh my gosh, that's what I need. I need to go there. So it was compelling. And then integrative systems. So you got to integrate. That was another one. And then regeneration, that was another one. And I'd say the hardest part of my journey now is that I don't have a new impulse. So
I understand that. Right.
I'm doing what I feel like I need to do, but it isn't as generative. So instead of waiting around, I'm doing what I know how to do. But it has this, anyway, I lack the transformational impulse that I used to have. So I'm kind of in that journey right now. Like, what's really next?
Yeah.
If there is anything next, maybe I just need to grow up and decide I own my own responsibility instead of being led by the nose.
I would push back against
strange.
led by the nose. I don't think you've been led by the nose. I think you've been open to the ideas, which is entirely different.
Refinement.
There isn't maybe a next big thing. There's just a refinement of how you're,
and that's the way
you're sharing that thing, because maybe you become, I tend to think in pictures or groupings, and there's always, there's the idea of maiden, matron, and crone, which I've resisted my whole life, but I'm probably crone now. Crone works. But if you talk about the idea of wisdom and being an elder, maybe that role is less about finding the new thing for yourself and more about finding the new ways to create that ripple effect and affect the systems around you in a bigger way.
And it's true. That's really good, Jody. And I think that's right. And that's what's happening by default, is that we realize that certainly at Regenesis, we've transformed from a consulting company to being, even though I'm the kind of remnant consultant because I can't take the architect out of me.
No, you can't do it.
No, but yet what Regenesis has morphed into is an educational institution. And even with our projects now, our job is not to do the job. Our job is to help others do their job, do the job.
That's exceptional.
So does everybody change their organization quickly? No, some people aren't in that position. I mean, Jody, you with DASNY, you're not going to change DASNY, right?
Well, I'm not there anymore because I couldn't change DASNY.
That's my point. But and you can't change a group overnight. But
it's true. I thought 15 years or 14 and a half years was a good investment, but it didn't need more investment from me. Somebody else might be the right person to affect that system.
Yeah, and I'm starting another consulting company with a few people, and it's parallel with Regenesis. Regenesis is engaged with it, but I'm going to have to be doing the same work with them.
The capacity for rebirth.
Actually, the first time I guess was educated by Bill and there's been many times that I've been educated by Bill, was when at DASNY, it was probably in the first year or two I was there, maybe 2007, 2008, somewhere in there, where we were really focused on lead projects and making that part of our standard operating procedure at DASNY for residence halls and for other projects that we touched. We touched a lot of projects. And there was a really good momentum built by the education you gave on the lead rating system, but on the process behind the lead rating system, which is key. Most people who teach the lead rating system teach the checklist and teach, that structure without teaching the why or the integration part. And then great work was done for a while, but we didn't devote ourselves to the refreshers that were needed to actually maintain that kind of awareness of the system.
To regenerate.
Right, to regenerate. We never regenerated. That's what it was. We thought we could flip a switch and that we would be done. And that's the thing I fight against most, is people who think that we can make a decision and then all of a sudden be better.
That the world is stable all of a sudden, or stabilized because you made one decision. And that is to get back to what the nature of the practice that we engage in the deliverable, in quotation marks, is the capability to practice a rebirth and an evolution of your thinking and a rebirth of relationship with the systems you're part of.
Because rebirth happens.
And that rebirth happens whether as an individual, oh man, I wish I'd stop worrying so much. How do I do that? Or I need to meditate more. Well, there's a rebirth there. You argue with your spouse, and I always screw that up. And then you regenerate your relationship the next day or that evening, right? So regeneration is always going on. It isn't going on with the places we live, though. We expect others to solve that. So the job is, how do we actually rebirth the relationship of a community with the ecological systems that support us? That's what this is all about.
It's more than just beyond the walls.
It's fascinating because one of the problems I've always had with architecture and the profession of construction is that we build buildings. So there's the front of it, which you've been talking about a lot, but there's also we build buildings and we walk away because our work is done. So I think the industry is also starting to recognize what I consider the regenerative nature of maintaining a relationship with a post-occupancy evaluation and then retooling your own ideas about what a building should be, et cetera, and continuing. It's not just beyond the walls that you have to think, but it's beyond the goal setting and the occupancy moment in time. You have to be related longer than that industry time frame, I think.
Well, lots of architects say that, and yet few do it. I don't know if I would do it. I mean, typically you get barely enough pay to do a building in the first place.
True.
And then hang around.
3 years.
Well, in our contracts, we tell our clients, you're working with us for 3 years. So we do story place work and generate potential in the community. And then it takes a year of a meeting every month, every 6 weeks with a core team that gets formed. And it takes about a year for them to actually kickstart, where they start, I remember one person in a meeting saying, why are you here? We should be facilitating this meeting. Go right ahead. Right. So that's
nice.
You wait for those moments, and when they take over, and then you support them for the next couple of years.
Participate in Aliveness.
I'm looking at your bookshelves behind you, and as a homeowner, they're beautiful. It's awesome, the room that you're in. As a homeowner, I know that you have to dust those bookshelves, and sometimes you have to rebuild something that's falling apart. And it almost feels like we've gotten so good at photographing our finished projects or rendering our goal set community building that we don't realize that that ever changes from that perfect picture. And personally, most of those pictures I don't think are very perfect, because we experience things through time too. So why do we have that disconnect between the pretty picture and time?
Why don't we have a reward for evolution?
We should have an award for evolution.
Mhm.
We shouldn't have an award for pretty pictures.
No.
I mean, they're pretty.
Mhm.
They really are. I've got several pretty pictures in my house, but actually the reason I like them is the story behind them. The picture that I see of my wedding day, it's a pretty picture, but it's not the picture that matters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The picture that I painted of some boats on Long Island Sound, it's a pretty picture, but painting it is what mattered.
Yeah.
Or the knowledge that somebody painted another picture.
So that's a great. I love this. That's if we can help people see that you are participating in aliveness, not
Yes.
cleanness, that's pretty powerful.
The greatest project ever.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to explore this in my head a little more. Is that time factor, the understanding of an object with the additive value of time starts to allow you to see that evolution, the storytelling and the evolution. I need to play with that a little bit more. I hadn't really formulated that, but I think I need to explore that. The other thing that I've been talking about a lot more, Bill, is joy, because for some reason we don't think that design and construction should have any relationship to joy, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. Shouldn't we be joyful in our work and in our relationships and in our process?
I want to tell you a story, which actually
Please.
reflects that. So we were finished with that first wastewater treatment plant in Vancouver, and did a presentation at Living Building, International Living Future Conference.
Mhm.
The architect that was, oh, come on, this is terrible, Miller Hall,
Okay.
and AECOM, CH2M Hill, Jacobs, big firms,
Big firms.
and the client, Metro Vancouver. And everybody got up and said, this is the greatest project we ever worked on. This is the greatest project we'd ever worked on. This is the greatest project we'd ever worked. I mean, really, it was like, and well, why? It wasn't that beautiful. It was nice. It was a wastewater treatment plant. And the reason it was the greatest project they'd ever worked on, because they had new relationships with each other and new relationships with the process,
Mm-hmm.
and new ways of being co-creative.
Oh.
And that was what enlivened, that energized people. So they came away.
That's excellent.
Working with guts.
I know it sounds like I'm a Pollyanna, but I think there's a point where you realize that the things worth doing, they're going to be hard. They're going to be sometimes messy. I use that term a lot. They're going to take maybe some moments of uncertainty and vulnerability from yourself. But overall, if you're not working with joy somewhere in there, then you're not going to bring your full self to the table.
And you're not working with guts either. I got to tell you a couple of stories of that project, because that was a hard one, because we were fired. We were literally fired on that project after 3 months. And the reason we were fired is because we were doing community facilitation. And we said, and they were controlling it, right? They wanted to control the messaging and who heard what and who was allowed to say what, because we got to build this project. We can't let the community get in the way. Said,
I work with government, I know.
Yeah, no, 100% transparency is the only way we work. So we warned them, and we had the meeting, and a woman in the meeting said, I'm giddy with excitement. This is the most open I've ever heard this community ever be in a meeting. And she said this, and I can't believe it's going to be allowed to continue. And sure enough, at the end of the meeting, they ushered Becker and me out of the room and said, this will never happen again. They were that focused on their insular process. They could not see the power of working that way.
Mm.
So we were fired that night. And but what was cool is that, we were friends with the director. Yeah, it's not working out. It's not a good fit. We get it. There were like 130 people there for the workshop the next 2 days. Bill and John, would you mind facilitating this workshop? He said, well, sure, we're here. What the heck? And the mid-level management said, don't bother us, we're working on something. And what they were working on is getting us rehired. So there was a whole movement to get us rehired independent of our interests. So we were rehired the next day, just to let you know. But that's the kind of yo-yo you can get on, and which is why the biggest aha, to get back to your earlier question, that I've had in this work, the biggest is that I had to manage my state.
Oh, that's so hard.
Well, yeah. So how do you sit there and say, and take it when, but you have to, because if I yelled, well, screw you,
Mhm.
you guys didn't listen to us, and we know better, that wouldn't have gone anywhere. So you just basically have to let people work it out on their own.
No one is in charge.
So it's a combination of knowing that you don't have control over other people's responses, at least not direct control.
No.
You can take that information in and adjust how you're communicating to help them understand, but you can't dictate how they're going to respond.
No, in a project in Chile, the CEO, gigantic corporation, and so we were working with, and he took me aside after we worked there 4 years for them. It was a successful project, but he took me aside and said, Bill, are you in charge? You're always changing the agenda and you're letting the community dictate what they're talking about. Who's in charge here? I said, his name was Arturo. I said, Arturo, are you in charge? Why did you hire me if you were in charge? So, I mean, we had a good enough relationship. We could get away with that. But he didn't answer the question. But the point of this is that no one's in charge.
Mm.
And if you think you're in charge, you're really in trouble. And so what you are is what all this work is about is working with energies.
Mm. Mm.
And surfing I like to say surfing emergence. Surfing the emergence of,
oh, that's a good phrase. I like that.
Energy.
It's dancing.
I want to bring this home, I think, with Lauren, with a story she told a while ago. She was talking, I forget which interview it was, Lauren, but you were talking about working on a project and there had to be some interior work that was done by a craftsman, and you laid out the basics of what was needed, but totally were informed by the abilities of the craftsman and what they thought was appropriate for that woodworking. And the client didn't get why you didn't just tell that person what to do. And your response was, because he knows how to do the work, and that can fulfill the needs of the design, but it can fulfill it better if I'm paying attention to what he knows is right and what he knows will work. And I think that that's kind of an example of surfing the emergence.
It's perfect. You want to elaborate on that story, Lauren?
So, sure. So actually, that's the way that I do all of my custom millwork. I intentionally leave kind of some of the details missing, right? So I show not how I want the connections to be done, but I give the overall picture. And then I basically say, you know how to build this better than I ever could. You tell me how you want to build it so that it looks mostly like this. This is the piece that we all want, but I don't work with wood every day. You know the wood, you know the species, you know the joints that'll work, you know what will, basically be the most durable for the longest. So you tell us how to build it.
So you've struck, to me, you've actually hit on a profoundly important aspect of this work, is that you are letting that person's essence be expressed, their inherent potential. You're not telling them what to do. You're saying, I give this direction and we got to do this for the client and we can figure this out together, but you're dancing with them as opposed to commanding them.
Right.
And that's this work is about discovering the inherent potential or the intrinsic nature or the essence, whatever term you want to use, of every living entity. That means every person you're working with and every living organism, like a place we're working with as well, an organization. That's it. That summarizes the entire work. You can do that, you're doing regenerative. You are regenerating.
Incredible.
It takes 4 iterations.
I'm going to share with you a book I'm reading. You may have heard of it, by David Graeber and David, somebody or other, I forget his name, called The Dawn of Everything.
Oh, no, I haven't heard of it.
And it came out last year. David Graeber passed away. He's an anthropologist.
Oh, wait, I have heard of it. Yes.
And he wrote 5,000 Years of Debt as well.
Yes.
Very interesting. Anyway, great read. But what he points out is that the command and control culture that we live in right now is actually, we think of it, it's an evolution from hunter-gatherers to agricultural systems and the polis to needing the command and control. And basically he points out that the really sophisticated Aboriginal peoples did not have one form of governance. They actually had, during hunting season, during what he uses one example of where they were draconianly command and control. And the minute that was done, flat organization. So it's not one or the other. And I learned this with my own architecture firm and managing a firm. Is that so we'd be going along and losing money. Well, you got to get control over the economy. We're going to make it hierarchical and command and control. We're going to really be disciplined, and we'd end up making money, and everybody would be very sad or dispirited because of the lack of creativity. And so we said, okay, we're making money. We can go flat organization, do it by studios, design studios, and free expression, and people would be really excited about that. And then we'd lose money, so we go right back to command and control. And then another 7 years, we'd go back to flat. And I realized after 4 iterations, took me 4 iterations to realize that maybe it's both.
It's both.
And that's really what sophisticated business consultants are teaching now, is how to be incredibly flexible with management based on what's needed, which is part of what you get through conversation, right? What do we need right now? All right, let's go there. We're sorry, got to be. And with my firm, I would say, listen, I'm never going to tell you to do anything unless I probably put my foot down 3 times in 15 years. So,
well, you talk about,
this.
You talk about knowing the essence of place. It's the essence of circumstance as well. And that should inform how you're leading through that, whether it's flatter or hierarchical. Or you said you have a meeting after this, and I know we're getting close to our time.
No, this is great. I hope this is going in some direction you want it to go.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
I'm going to rewatch it about 6 times personally.
Okay, well, happy to do this again. I enjoy talking to. I realize I'm doing a lot of talking, so my apologies. But
that's why you're here.
Please don't apologize. Oh my goodness.
Anyway, fun to visit with both of you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Inspiration.
Do you have time for 2 very quick questions or no?
Sure. Well, let's see how quick they are.
Just do the one. I think the other one.
Okay, the one is evident. Okay, we always ask who your hero is. Who can we learn from? In written word, or if they're around still, that's fine. But who has inspired you that we can learn from?
Wendell Berry.
Wendell Berry.
Right.
Well, that's not an answer we've gotten yet.
No.
Excellent.
Worth reading.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you.
His books are all profound. He was hired by USDA to write I read his first major book was The Unsettling of America, Culture and Agriculture. That was an essay for the USDA, I think. Powerfully profound, but read his poetry, read his.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I need to introduce myself to Wendell Berry. I haven't.
My aunt and uncle are huge fans.
New Yorker had an article on him a couple of weeks ago. I'd have to read it myself, but anyway.
Okay. In reciprocity, you should read Humankind by Rutger Bregman. I think you would like it tremendously and be informed by it. It's about how we're designing systems for the negative response of human beings that we think is normal. And what we should be doing is designing systems that support the excellence of us all. Well written, fascinating.
Thanks for joining us for Subject to Change. Thanks to Bill Reed for being with us. What an inspiration. Lauren and I appreciate every minute.
Gotta go.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.